Welcome everybody to part 2 of the ACE Report video blog series, and I'd like to encourage you to go to our website www.acereport.org. I'm your host Nick Lawrence, and I'm here with Dr. Lou Cuthbert from the Alliance for a Clean Environment. And in our first series, as part of this series, we've been talking about minimizing the chaos and reducing radiation exposure by improving Limerick Nuclear Power Plant's fatally flawed and inadequate emergency and evacuation plans. So in this series, let us talk about the voices that are out there requesting the change that we had talked about in the first part of our series.
Okay. An excellent follow-up to the first report, Nick. There are a number of groups, organizations, and prominent officials out there who are saying, we need to do better. We can do better. We must do better. So these calls are coming from a pretty wide range of groups, organizations, experts, and elected officials, including the National Resources Defense Council, the NRDC, the Union of Concerned Scientists, U.S. Senator Bob Casey, Democrat from Pennsylvania, the Associated Press and their investigative reporting series, the Pottstown Mercury did a series of articles and editorials, the Alliance for a Clean Environment, which is our organization, of course, and many residents living around the nuclear power plant. So there's a pretty broad coalition of people saying, hey, there's something really wrong with this picture, we need to do better.
So let's start with some of these individuals. Start with the National Resources Defense Council. What's their take on this, and what are they requesting?
Well, they filed an appeal in 2011 over Limerick's outdated severe accident mitigation alternatives that included assessing consequences of a Limerick accident or terrorist attack. That's a mouthful, but basically what that really focused on was having a realistic plan and strategies to deal with and to really assess what could happen here. So they took action. They filed legal action.
Mm-hmm.
They actually won their case in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia, and just based on where Limerick is and proximity to lots of people, the potential impact of a severe problem. If there's a severe accident, it would be much greater than at most of the nuclear plants in the United States. So the NRDC said because of the density of the population, they really had to challenge, and they won the case. In their analysis, they determined that there are more than 8 million people who live within 50 miles of Limerick, which is the radius that the NRC told U.S. citizens to evacuate during Fukushima, as you may recall. So basically, there's some graphics and some reports. There's some pictures that they've done that are really helpful. But just to give people some feel, the NRDC identified over 1,900 public schools and 176 hospitals within 50 miles.
Mm-hmm. But that population has increased a lot over the years from the time that the plant was built, right?
Dramatically.
And so the area in which that would be affected by this is much bigger, not only geographically, but also with the population.
In numbers, yeah, because all of the original plans were based on 1980 census data, and obviously tremendous increases. So that's basically where the NRDC is. And ironically, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission said, "Oh, Exelon, you don't like this ruling, you're appealing it," which in fact they did. NRC said, "We'll stand next to you and join your appeal against the NRDC and the 8 million people who live within,
Well, I
50
remember
miles."
in our first of the series, you mentioned that they have decided that fewer people need to be evacuated, yet the population has increased dramatically, yet they're requesting that fewer people actually be evacuated. I mean,
Yeah,
what
of
logic,
course.
what sense does that make?
Well, somebody once said, "You can't fix stupid." I'm the eternal optimist. I believe that you can fix stupid, and I believe that we have an obligation to try to fix stupid here. The NRDC's director was just kind of startled by the absence of logic here, and one of his quotes was, "After Fukushima, it seems just plain nutty not to require a new study." I mean, that kind of says it all. How can you not do another study?
Well, I mean, you would think
Yeah.
that you would. I mean, we study everything from soup to nuts about other things, but when it comes to something as important as this,
Yeah.
we're not going to require one.
Of course not. It makes too much sense.
Because we might get information that goes against what their intentions are.
Well, yeah, another maxim comes to mind. Don't confuse me with the facts. I've already made up my mind. That's pretty much where the NRC is coming from.
Right. So,
There's another big group out there the Union of Concerned Scientists that we've researched and referenced and reported on over a number of years. Very, very good people. One of their senior scientists said they have not taken into account the issues associated with uncontrolled population growth close to nuclear plants. That was picked up and reported on ABC National News in June of 2011, just as you said a moment ago. So yeah, there's another big group out there saying something really wrong with this picture.
So do we have any political help? Is there anybody any senators or representatives that are willing to put their name on this whole idea of taking a look at this again?
Absolutely, and the tallest standing hero in this story so far in our region is U.S. Senator Bob Casey.
Okay.
Senator Casey urged immediate review of nuclear evacuation zones in March of 2012, wrote to the NRC. He said things like, "My constituents are deeply concerned about emergency evacuation plans. A year after Japan's disaster, it's time that millions of Pennsylvanians living in close proximity to nuclear power plants know the unique characteristics of each plant are taken into account in the development of evacuation plans." And Pennsylvania, has several facilities. Our immediate focus here is the Limerick plant because of its proximity to Philadelphia. But Senator Casey said, Pennsylvanians have a right to know that the unique circumstances are in fact being considered and included in meaningful changes, upgrades, improvements. The NRC's going the wrong way.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's just, like I said, as we said earlier, it makes common sense. It's just common sense that the population's increased and we're using standards from many, many years ago, that those standards need to be upgraded. There needs a new plan, a new way to take a look at this. And any other organizations, I think the Associated Press did something as well, which lends a lot of credibility to what we're talking about.
Yeah, the Associated Press, thankfully, has done a series of special investigative reports. They've done some pretty scathing indictments of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in recent years, but part 3 of the investigative work done by Jeff Don focused on populations around U.S. nuke plants soaring. So Mr. Don went in and did his analysis, did his reporting, and it's pretty obvious that analysis has direct implications for everybody living in the greater Philadelphia region who are anywhere close to the Limerick Nuclear Plant. There's an entire analysis that's going to be available as part of the companion blog at www.acereport.org. But let me just give you a couple of highlights for the folks who are listening to this report. Despite everything that happened at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, evacuation zones have remained frozen at a 10-mile radius since 1978. Frozen's a pretty good term. I mean, they were arbitrarily selected, they were flash frozen, and they're still there in the exact same configuration.
And apparently unwilling to take a look at that to change it.
Well, if they looked, they didn't look long.
Right,
It was
exactly.
one of those look away,
Right.
we don't want to look at this. The AP reported that the NRC, working with the nuclear industry, repeatedly weakened or failed to enforce safety standards. This has been picked up and reported by a lot of people, including ACE, over the past several years. So the NRC has worked with the industry to weaken and reduce or failed to enforce regulations and standards. Just a couple of other thoughts with the Associated Press series. There were some regulations from the federal government that said low population areas were preferred for siting, for locating nuclear plants. Well, Limerick is about 21 miles from Philadelphia with some pretty heavy population density. It was not low density in the 70s when this thing was rammed down the throats of people living in the greater Philly region. And the population has increased dramatically.
So, and it's certainly not low density, even if they considered low density before, it is not that way. That the population's exploded around the plant in
Yeah,
that way. So.
it's pretty hard to deny the obvious. I mean,
Right.
you can only deny the obvious for so long, and I think we've reached the tipping point.
Apparently NRC knows how to do that, though. How to deny the obvious.
Well, they're turning it into an art form, according to some experts that we've spoken with, Nick. If the NRC actually took a serious look at some of this data, and if they required meaningful standards for evacuation and emergency plans, there would be no nuclear power plants operating in heavily populated areas. And relative to the Limerick plant, if there was a serious look, I mean, an honest look with some integrity at comprehensive evacuation plans and current demographics, which have been ignored for decades, they'd have to close a plant like the Limerick Nuclear Plant, Nick.
So if you keep the evacuation standards low in some way, Lou, it gives a justification for the existence of the plant. Well, because they say the idea is that, well, if the standards are low and that's all that people know, well, there's no reason why we shouldn't build a plant.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously they called it a low-density population area before, so it made it seem like that would be an okay place to locate it. But people have always been upset about the location of the plant.
Well, absolutely. And this is a successor agency. The original agency was the Atomic Energy Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, has continued this this wonderful tradition of being fact-challenged and having an aversion to acknowledging the truth. There's another big player here, at least in the greater Tri-County region in terms of Montgomery, Berks, and Chester County, and that's the Pottstown Mercury. Mm-hmm. This is a newspaper. It's the primary newspaper in this immediate area that over the course of 2011 and 2012 did probably a dozen pieces, articles and editorials that have addressed different aspects and parts of this issue about Limerick Nuclear Plant and their emergency plan and evacuation routes. And they've done a pretty good job. Just some of the titles, and people, if they want to do a search, can do this. Population soars near the Limerick Nuclear Plant, 2011. Casey not sure 10-mile evacuation zone around nuclear plants is enough. License review should consider the evacuation plan, 2011. One of my personal favorites was a cartoon that appeared in the Pottstown Mercury in 2011, in July of 2011, that talked about the fact that license review had to consider an evacuation plan. And it looks like a Rube Goldberg device. And there are two guys standing here with the towers in the background. Hopefully people watching this video will get a chance to see this cartoon in its entire full screen. But these two guys are standing there next to a Rube Goldberg type contraction that appears to be a pedal-powered balloon to try to get away from Limerick. And the towers, the ominous towers, are in the back. Says, I'm not saying it doesn't look absurd, but have you looked at the evacuation plan?
Right, exactly.
This machine's absurd. This machine's our best hope compared to an even more absurd evacuation plan.
So again, let's talk about what ACE's campaign is about and what you would want the people watching this video blog to do about this. What can we do as a population, as concerned citizens, as an organization like ACE? What can we do?
Well, let me just start by saying that the coalition is growing all the time, Nick. When we first started talking about this, it was for a pretty small group. We've literally taken thousands of signatures in recent years. So now the group's getting bigger in terms of the Limerick plant, and obviously much bigger, when you think about people like the NRDC and the Union of Concerned Scientists and heroes like U.S. Senator Bob Casey and the Pottstown Mercury standing up and speaking out. So ACE has had this kind of in full frame for some time now, and we've repeatedly called on people to stand up and speak out, and that's where we're going one more time here. We need a couple of things. We need independent, immediate notification of a radiation event with a release, which the industry has never been good at. And we've said repeatedly, and we'll continue to say throughout this series, we need an expanded evacuation zone. It has to go from 10 to 50 miles in our judgment. And we need an expanded ingestion pathway zone that's currently 50 miles that needs to go to 100 miles in our analysis. If there's an event and there's a contamination of water, dairy, milk, and other products, and crops and foods following an accident or meltdown at Limerick, we need to take that out further.
Well, we're going to be talking about a lot of these in our future series here on the ACE Report video blog series. You can go to ACE Report, www.acereport.org. We appreciate all of you who are watching this. Continue to see this series. This is Nick Lawrence, and we'll see you the next time right here.